Hey all. So let's talk about the Paris Olympics opening ceremony for a few moments. I've been engaged in a bit of back and forth around this on Facebook. I felt very uninspired by the quality of the conversation. Obviously, I keep getting other people's feed in. And the kind of viral memes that I've been propagating at such a superficial level of understanding, I found to be frustrating, to say the least. And my base position around what happened is that it's distraction and that it is another opportunity to get us to argue with each other. But there is something that I find very nefarious about this flippant dismissal of the criticism of Christians around what happened that day. And I want to dig into that. So we've all seen it. It's some scene that looks like it's come out of a college graduation ceremony. It's like extremely low production value. There's this, it's all really kitschy for some reason. It's trans people everywhere, men pretending to be women, vice versa, I suppose. We have an obese woman at the center that is supposed to be Jesus in one interpretation, Apollo in another interpretation. We'll get into these. We have this absolutely kitschy, horrible looking blue character that's supposed to be Dionysus, apparently. I don't know why he's blue all of a sudden. Maybe there's a little bit of postmodern melding of religions here and getting a bit of Krishna love into that guy. But generally, it's just a hot mess. And I'd like to untangle this just a little bit. So the general criticism, of course, coming from the religious right, is that this is blasphemy. This is a postmodern, kitschy, disgusting, blasphemous rendition of Da Vinci's The Last Supper. And they do look a bit alike. They do. Let's see if I can get this up and running here. I think I have it. Yeah. So this is the one perspective. This is the Christian perspective, but frankly, there's a lot of people who are not Christian who are also seeing it this way. And I think that's good, actually, because it's showing a certain kind of unity in the people. So there is one rendition, and then I'm going to just, it's not like this is news to you guys, but let's have a look at the other one for a moment. And this is a painting by a Dutch painter, Jan Harmens van Billiards, The Feast of the Gods. And so another narrative is that this kitschy college graduation production is supposed to look like this. A bit, I suppose. The central character here obviously is a man, looks very little like the obese woman in the college production. And it's a very confused piece, at least based on my knowledge of Greek mythology. Let me speak a little bit about that, and then we'll get back to these narratives and explore, okay, the whole take that is satanic blasphemy and that it's a rendition of a Dionysian orgy. Because at the end of the day, I think if you actually know anything at all about Dionysian cults, it wouldn't really make much of a difference. And we're going to get into that. That's why this argument that, oh, it's just Dionysius, bro, relax. That's not actually an argument if you're smart, if you're educated, rather than being somebody who just propagates memes in order to make yourself feel good and be the hero of your own story without making any sacrifice, which is what a lot of you are pursuing because you're scared and you're dysregulated, you're stressed, you're traumatized, and your frontal cortex isn't operating optimally. And so you don't have the capacity to process and think independently. And so you just propagate memes like input output machines. And you have no self reflection whatsoever. And you become a culture warrior. That's what happens to a lot, both sides. But in this particular case, I'm addressing you on the left a little bit more because you've been so condescending and flippant in this particular case. But yeah, I loved Greek mythology as a kid. I had a lovely teacher in primary school. Her name was Aleka, and she used to tell us stories from the Greek pantheon. And I loved that stuff. And I consumed all of the books about it from the local library. And this world became one of my primary worlds of inquiry and exploration as a young kid. So it's not like I don't know anything about this. But that being said, it's a long time ago, and so I don't remember all of the details. But of course, Dionysus, the god of fertility, of wine, of theater and ecstasy, and these things, he featured somewhat prominently in my childhood as well, because Dionysus is such an outrageous character. And even then, at that point in human history, and that was a pagan culture, the Dionysian cult was considered too crazy. And so Dionysus, he didn't get a seat in Mount Olympus. He wasn't included because he was wild, right? So Aleka gave me an introduction in this particular universe, and it was a fantastic universe. And it's kind of like Tolkien, you know, Harry Potter. It's like we have different pathways into these imaginal realms. This was mine. This was mine. And that's why I find it really annoying to see people deal with it so flippantly. Obviously, I don't affiliate myself with any kind of Greek ancient antique cult, obviously. I am closer and closer in my spiritual life to Jesus Christ. And just so you know, and I'm exploring with the same truth compass there as I'm exploring everywhere else. And there's a lot that I don't agree with in what I'm hearing from Christians. So we have this primary narrative from Christians that, yeah, it's intentionally blasphemous. And when you look at a lot of the things happening in the world, it tends to be layered. And so that some people will receive one message and other people will receive another message. We saw that, for instance, with the shooting of Donald Trump recently. One statement from a doctor propagated to the left saying, oh, it was just a glass shard, or it was just incredibly superficial, the wound. Another narrative, another doctor's note propagated to the right that confirmed that it was quite dangerous and he almost died. It always happens like this. Have you asked yourself why? Have you asked yourself why whenever there's something dramatic that happens in the world, we get two completely distinct narratives propagated to both sides of the culture war, both of them credible, both of them giving us fuel for hatred? Don't be input-output machines here. You're being manipulated. Yeah, you're being manipulated. So the thing is, obviously, there's a resemblance. I mean, I showed it to you. There's a resemblance between what happened in the Last Supper. There's a lot of money and planning and thinking going into this. We now have confirmation from the obese woman that sat at the table that she confirmed that she understood it to be a rendition of a biblical theme. So all of you guys on the left who say, "Oh, it's Dionysus, bro. It's a bacchanal. Chill out, bro. You maybe learn a little bit about Greek mythology, bro. You're just so stressed out, bro." Like, no, that isn't what is being confirmed through what has been revealed. So there must be a level of intentionality in what happened that was meant to provoke the religious right. You don't make a mistake like that with that much planning, with that much money. And when you have a track record culturally for loving that provocation, and it's getting to be kind of lame and boring. It's like, if you are so obsessed with ridiculing somebody else for their beliefs, it's probably time to get a life. Because you're acting like an absolute child, a boring, uncreative child. And this kind of blasphemy, if you will, is propagating through all of popular culture. It's the only thing that matters. Saying fuck off to God. This is the peak of creativity in popular culture. The peak. It's boring. It's so boring. I mean, feel free to disagree, but do you agree that it is boring and is getting to be super formulaic? So that is the one narrative. Whether you agree with that or not, that it was the Last Supper, hey, we can have an argument about that. But let's now look at the idea that it was indeed a bacchanal, a Dionysian orgy. And maybe when you get informed about what a Dionysian orgy was like, you wouldn't be so fast to propagate those memes. So it was fun how arrogant those memes were. Obviously, people on both sides think the other side is stupid. That's part of the culture war, or you're a moron, you're a moron. And fair enough. I mean, it's a way to demonize others and to make you build yourself up so that you can, be the hero of your own narrative without making any sacrifice or being courageous. As I said, that's the modus operandi for a lot of people. But let's dive into it. A Dionysian cult. Let's look at Dionysus first. He was the child of Zeus and the human woman Semele. I think Semele was the daughter of a king. I don't remember quite right now. But Zeus impregnated Semele by lightning. And Semele died at some point during this process. But the fetus of their offspring had developed long and far enough for Zeus to take the offspring and to sew it into his thigh. I mean, this is Greek mythology, is kind of wild, but one of the symbolisms in Greek mythology, as far as I understand it, and I don't claim to be an expert, but I have a long history with it, is that the male thigh is kind of like a female womb. And so this makes it so that Dionysus has grown inside of a woman and also inside of a man, which is quite unique, right? Hera, being the wife of Zeus, obviously is jealous because Zeus is a very promiscuous god and has sex with a lot of women, many of them human. And so Hera wants to have Dionysus killed, and she goes to the Titans and says, kill this child. And the Titans, they oblige, and they tear Dionysus apart and they boil him. And then obviously he's dead, but he is reconstructed. I think it is by Rhea. and goes to live with nymphs in the woods. Zeus sends him to live with nymphs in the woods, where he is effectively raised as a girl. So already, yeah, Dionysus is the god of transgenderism, if you will. That's probably why all of the Dionysus nymphs, or they were gods. There's like so many narratives about what they were, the people at that table in Paris. But they were typically men, and maybe there were some women there as well. But I think they looked like men. I'm not sure. I don't understand this game. But the point being is that, okay, so there is this reversal theme happening with Dionysus. He was a gender bending god. Okay, and he grew up and was a Greek god, and was a particularly extreme Greek god, maybe in part because he had grown up in both a woman and a man, and because he'd been shredded by his stepmom, and yeah, it was a mess. So I don't know. Maybe he wants revenge. I don't know all the details about this legendary character, but gradually, he goes on his journeys. He fights with the Amazonians for whatever reasons. Some legends has it that he conquers India and gives them wine and the knowledge of growing wine. I don't see this reflected in history, in the sort of the three-dimensional history, but it's mythology, guys. It's hard to know exactly what to take seriously and what to not take seriously. But gradually he finds his own, I guess, and he becomes the god of fertility, of wine, of ecstasy, and all of these things. But you could think of Dionysus as a god that was representing, in a way, Mother Earth, with the nymphs and the maenads that followed him. There's a type of nymph that was associated with Dionysus. It was followed by satyrs, who were half man, half god, so chimeric beings, which is a bit freaky, given that the ban on chimeric biotechnology, splicing of genes and stuff has just been lifted. But let's not go into that. It's a god that is associated with sort of the chaos of Mother Earth and the coming and going of seasons and the coming and going of life. And so these rituals that supposedly we saw represented at the Paris Olympics, they were incredibly wild, orgiastic feasts. But these were not feasts in the way that we think about them, like they ate grapes and drank wine. They drank wine, all right, but it wasn't just having a good time, as some people have described him over the last couple of days as the god of merriment. There's a lot of naivete that goes into making that statement. There's a lot of naivete because Dionysus was a very dark god, very dark god. And yeah, of course, ecstasy and wine and joy and celebration, there was that as well. There's always the polarity, the dichotomy in every one of these Greek mythological gods. But the Dionysian rituals were pretty horrific. It started out with like just consuming a lot of wine, and even the children were included in this. And I think they got jugs of close to a gallon each, and then they were awarded prizes, like awards, if they finished it the quickest. So that's a gallon of wine to start the party, and children were included. It's more like 3.2 liters or whatever. I'm not quite sure how that particular measurement comes to us in this day and age, but I guess that they have found archaeological remnants of these containers. There, about 15 priestesses in the ritual are pouring and waiting for everyone to become absolutely off their rocker insane. Um, to some extent, the wine is blended with water, I believe, but it's wine, so they get proper batshit drunk. And then it's huge, massive orgies, everyone having sex, and I'm sure the children were part of that. And not just sex with humans, animals are part of it. So women have sex with animals, and part of the fun of being part of a Dionysian cult and being a Maenad, which is, yes, it is the female follower of Dionysius. It is that you need to go through an initiation, because the Dionysian cult is a mystery religion, which means that you need to be initiated into it. It's like a secret religion. And maybe maybe the people who think it's not too much of a sensational thing to present the Paris Olympics as a Dionysian orgy. Maybe it's a secret to them as well. I don't think they know these things, because their posts appeared incredibly naive. So these Maenads, for the women to become Maenads, their initiation ritual is that they need to kill a goat with their bare hands. They literally shred it with their hands. They tear it limb from limb in some wine drunken ecstasy where there is no limitations to their behavior anymore. So they go clinically insane. The goal is to go completely beyond morals and beyond any kind of boundaries that are considered civilized and normative. So you have to go beyond that. That's the goal. And so these women tear apart the goats, and they rip into their flesh, and then they stuff their faces with goat organs, and the blood everywhere, and they smear it on their bodies and on their sex. And it's like and it's just death and life. That's the point of it. That's the whole point of it. It's like this completely off your rocker union with the principles of nature of death and life. And it's not supposed to be any trace of humanity left in it. Sometimes stories would have it children would be replacing the goat or the other animals. So you would have then kids being torn limb from limb. And there's actually one legend of the daughters of King Minya that was that confirms this. The King Minya, he has 3 daughters, and they don't want to be part of the orgiastic feasts, and so they just sit at home and they spin their garments. And Dionysus is very provoked that there's women in the town that don't want to be part of it. And so he uses his godlike magic and makes snakes and vines come up where they sit, and so they go into a similar kind of trance. And so one of the women goes and picks up her child from the crib, and all of the 3 sisters, they tear the child limb from limb. And in their madness, they go to the Maenads who do this kind of regularly, and present the dismembered child and hope to be like included, but no, they are actually rejected, and then they're turned to bats or something, and the story ends. As another Greek tragedy, I suppose. So it's only Dionysus, bro. It's only a bacchanal. Okay, it's only a bacchanal. Okay, you didn't know this, did you? Like the people, those of you who share that meme, you didn't know that, did you? No, I don't think you did. So the Dionysian cult was a murderous, actually cannibalistic. They ate people as well. It was um, part of the symbolic significance of becoming one with Dionysus, who himself was, torn limb from limb, and they cooked stew on Dionysus. Okay, let's tear humans limb from limb and cook stew on them, and then we'll be partaking. I guess it's like a Dionysian Eucharist. Eat a human being and become included in the Dionysian cult. I think it's really fascinating to see as well that in contemporary, conspiracy theory and in the times of revelation that we're in, there's many people who are actually arguing that Dionysus is the precursor for Jesus. I think that's pretty wild. Or some people actually believe that because supposedly he turns like water into wine, and they've made up all kinds of overlaps in the life of Dionysius, but it's basically BS. But there seems to be this narrative here as well that, okay, some people think Dionysus is related to the Christ, and some people believe he's related to Satan. And so that is another interesting debate that we have. I would say that the latter is a lot more true than the former. And I wonder myself, I don't have any clear take on the significance of goats being so strongly associated with Dionysus, and one of the primary animals associated with Satan, or like Baphomet and these, is the goat. One of the things that you can't claim of Christians is that they're stupid when it comes to symbolism. They know their symbolism more than people on the left who think religion is to take drugs at a festival and have like your eyes roll back and be transported somewhere. That's not spirituality. That's recreation. That's entertainment. Problem with the left is that their spirituality doesn't include a concept of evil. And if you don't have evil in your spirituality, you don't have spirituality. You're deceived. You're deceived. So I don't know. I don't know if there is an actual link between Dionysius and Baphomet, say, but that goat head is pretty damn interesting for me. Finally, I just want to address a little bit this idea that a lot of people presented, that of course, these are Olympian gods, and that makes sense during the Olympics, and why criticize it? This is historically accurate. There seems to be some disagreement about whether Dionysus was actually part of the Mount Olympus or not. I've been looking a little bit into it online today, but the way I grew up with it, he wasn't. That he was too extreme. And I think there was a tyrant of Athens in the 6th century BC. I think his name was Pisistratos. He came to the point where he wanted to sort of legalize or accept the Dionysian cult. And then there was a discussion of whether you were going to include Dionysus on Mount Olympus. According to what I've learned, that didn't happen. But according to some people, and obviously many of the people that thought this was a great ceremony, they believe he was part of the Olympus. In the event that he replaced a goddess called Hestia. I think Hestia was called Vesta in Roman mythology, just like Dionysus was called Bacchus in Roman mythology, which is why we have the word bacchanal. It comes from the Rome side of things. Um, Hestia represents the hearth of the home, and she was um, present during the naming ceremony of children and things like that. So she is a strong representative of the family. So if you live in the worldview that Dionysus belongs on Mount Olympus, you also live in the worldview that he replaced Hestia, who represented the safety of the family home. You live in the worldview that the safety of the family home has been discarded in favor of drunken orgies where sometimes children are eaten. I'm not sure it's a good replacement, personally. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think children would rather have a safe home under Hestia or would be invited to drink a gallon of wine and be eaten at the Dionysian orgy? I don't know how common it was for children to be eaten at these orgies, but legend has it that it did happen. So I don't think that's a particularly strong argument to be making, dude, that Dionysus was on Mount Olympus. You're kind of making the opponent of you kind of making the point of your opponent, your enemy, seem quite a bit stronger. That you're in favor of a god who's cannibalistic, who eats children, who is drunken, who is actively seeking to destroy civilization. This is it is terrifying how ignorant some people are. Just doing input output, not having any self-awareness whatsoever. And I think it's time to change that. As for the religious right, I understand the anger. Of course, it was intentional. You have to be an absolute moron to think that the people who were behind this ceremony didn't know that there was a resemblance, especially given that the involved actors wrote about it online. I think Christians have had to take a lot of madness, a lot of criticism over many years, and not been very sensitive about it whatsoever. The people attacking you are sensitive if you get the tiniest little detail wrong. Maybe they identify as a unicorn that day and you forgot the unicorn pronoun, and now they are butthurt. Shall we say that this is a rather a bigger offense than the many other offenses that are going the other way? So I get it. I get it. And it doesn't really matter to me when I know who Dionysus is, if it was Dionysus or if it was like blasphemy for the Last Supper. I don't mind, because effectively they're both equally bad. And I guess the best thing that we could do at this point is to step out of the polarity between left and right, Christian, atheist, pagan, whatever, and to realize that there are bigger forces that are moving between us, seeking to make us hate each other. Whether that's satanic or human or Dionysian or something else, leave that for another day. Probably all of them at once. But let's redirect attention to the real enemy and don't be stupid, okay? Like, please don't be dumb. Don't be dumb. That's all I have. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to look through a couple of the comments. I see there's a couple here. Donald Pine, desecration is my description. Yeah, I agree. Lara, fascinating indeed. Thanks for the info. You're welcome. Just live well. I knew a little, but not as much as you were sharing. I also didn't know the left doesn't hold the concept of evil. Yeah, no, it doesn't. Not in a meaningful way, because evil is spiritual, and if you don't acknowledge spiritual evil, you have to put it in a human being, and then your whole cosmology becomes trivial. That's when you think that no, Trump is Hitler and the devil and, everything at once, because your spirituality is primitive. Yeah. Tim, I take Dionysian as cultural and historical literacy. Sadly, our educational system failed. I don't understand what I mean. Admittedly, intolerance doesn't help anyone. And I think that message is particularly needed on the left, that is inclusive to everyone as long as they have exactly the same opinion and exactly the same indoctrination as myself. There is, of course, similar tendencies on the right. And just to make it clear, I'm not hopeful for the right's ability to right the ship, shall we say. I think the next chapter of this insane movie that we're living through is the rise of a kind of a fake, a full Christian revival based on false doctrine, especially centered around the Scofield Study Bible that was propagated to the evangelicals that make up a huge portion of Trump's voter base. They have been indoctrinated into dangerous ideas for the past 150 years. So stay sane out there, guys. Stay sane and don't be stupid. Thank you. Thank you for watching. I'd be happy to answer any more questions and comments that you add to the stream or the video. Bye-bye.